United States Army is proud to focus the big picture camera on its sister service, the United States Navy. In telling the story of one of its most distinguished wartime leaders,
they led massive fleets, changed naval warfare, and left a lasting impact on history. Some won battles against impossible odds with smart tactics. Others were known for their strong defenses, holding the line when victory seemed out of reach. But in a war full of skilled admirals, who were the very best? These are the 5 greatest admirals of World War II. First up is Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, the man who took a battered navy and led it to victory. When Japan launched its surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the U.S. Pacific Fleet was left in ruins. Battleships lay crippled, morale was at an all-time low, and the Japanese Navy seemed unstoppable. In the middle of this chaos, Nimitz was handed an almost impossible task, rebuilding America's naval power and taking the fight back to Japan. But Nimitz wasn't just a skilled strategist. He was a leader who inspired confidence even when things looked hopeless. He took charge of a navy that was outnumbered and reeling from defeat. But instead of playing it safe, he focused on winning. His first major test came at the Battle of Midway in June 1942. Thanks to intelligence from U.S. codebreakers, Nimitz knew where and when the Japanese would attack. Using this information, he set up a daring ambush. The result? 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were sunk, and the tide of war shifted in America's favor. From there, Nimitz pushed forward with an island-hopping strategy, skipping over heavily defended Japanese strongholds and capturing key islands that put the U.S. closer and closer to Japan. His leadership led to crucial victories at the Philippine Sea, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, paving the way for the final push. When Japan finally surrendered in September 1945, Nimitz stood aboard the USS Missouri, watching as the war officially came to an end. Through calm leadership, brilliant strategy, and unwavering determination, Nimitz turned disaster into triumph, securing his place as one of the greatest admirals in history. While Nimitz led the U.S. Navy to victory, Admiral Isakuro Yamamoto was the man who came dangerously close to securing Japan's control of the Pacific. Yamamoto was an unusual figure in Japan's military. He had studied in the United States, understood its strengths, and even warned his superiors that taking on America in a long war could be a mistake. But when the war became inevitable, he committed himself fully to Japan's cause. If they had to fight, he would make sure Japan struck first and struck hard. He was the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor, the devastating surprise assault that left 8 U.S. battleships destroyed or badly damaged in just a few hours. The Pacific Fleet was crippled, and for a moment, it seemed like Yamamoto's vision was unstoppable. Japan's forces swept across the Pacific, capturing territory at an incredible pace. But Yamamoto knew speed was everything. His strategy depended on crushing the U.S. Navy early, forcing America to negotiate before its massive industry could turn the tide. He planned to lure the U.S. fleet into one decisive battle and destroy it completely. That battle came at Midway in June 1942, but instead of victory, he suffered a disaster. The Americans, led by Nimitz, had cracked Japan's secret codes and were waiting. In a few brutal hours, 4 of Yamamoto's aircraft carriers were sunk, shattering Japan's momentum. Even after Midway, Yamamoto remained Japan's most skilled strategist, overseeing operations in the Solomon Islands. But in April 1943, American intelligence intercepted his flight plans, acting fast. The U.S. sent long-range fighters to ambush his plane over Bougainville. Yamamoto was killed, and with him, Japan lost its greatest naval mind, while Yamamoto was shaping Japan's naval war. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz was waging a different kind of battle beneath the waves. Donitz wasn't leading massive surface fleets like Nimitz or Yamamoto. His war was fought beneath the waves. As the mastermind of Germany's U-boat campaign, he turned the Atlantic into a deadly battleground, using submarines to strangle Britain's supply lines. At the start of World War II, Britain relied on convoys to transport food, weapons, and fuel from the U.S. and its colonies. Donitz saw this as a golden opportunity. Instead of attacking ships one by one, he introduced the Wolfpack tactic. Groups of U-boats working together to overwhelm convoys, hitting them from multiple directions at once. The results were devastating. For the first few years of the war, Donitz's U-boats dominated the Atlantic. Merchant ships were sinking faster than they could be replaced, and by 1942 alone, over 1,000 Allied vessels had been destroyed. Britain was dangerously close to starvation. If the attacks had continued unchecked, the war might have played out very differently. But Germany's advantage didn't last. The Allies cracked German naval codes, developed better sonar, and used long-range aircraft to hunt U-boats in open waters. Suddenly, Donitz's submarines were being destroyed faster than they could be built. By 1943, Hitler lost faith in Germany's traditional navy and put Donitz in charge of it all. But by then, the damage was already done. Germany's naval strength was fading fast. Even as the war crumbled around him, Donitz remained fiercely loyal to Hitler. In April 1945, as the Third Reich fell, Hitler named him his successor. Donitz led Germany for just 23 days before surrendering to the Allies. After the war, he was convicted at Nuremberg and sentenced to 10 years in prison. His U-boats had nearly crippled Britain, but in the end, even his most ruthless tactics couldn't save Germany from defeat. While Donitz fought his war beneath the waves, Admiral Andrew Cunningham dominated the Mediterranean, proving himself as one of Britain's most brilliant naval leaders. Cunningham was a fearless, no-nonsense leader who kept the Mediterranean under Allied control when Britain stood nearly alone against the Axis. The Mediterranean was one of the war's toughest battlegrounds, with the Royal Navy constantly under threat from the Italian fleet, German U-boats, and relentless Luftwaffe airstrikes. Unlike the vast Pacific or the convoy battles of the Atlantic, Cunningham had to fight in tight, high-risk waters where every decision mattered. His most brilliant move came at the Battle of Taranto in November 1940. The Italian Navy had the ships, but they played it safe, keeping them in port. Cunningham saw an opportunity and sent a handful of outdated swordfish biplanes from the carrier HMS Illustrious to attack at night. The result? 3 Italian battleships were crippled in a single airstrike, proving that aircraft, not battleships, would control the future of naval warfare. The Japanese took note. A year later, they used similar tactics at Pearl Harbor. But Cunningham's toughest test came in 1941 during the evacuation of Crete. As German forces poured onto the island, the Royal Navy rushed to save thousands of trapped Allied troops. The cost was brutal. German bombers hammered Cunningham's fleet, sinking and damaging dozens of ships. Some urged him to retreat, but he refused, famously saying, "It takes 3 years to build a ship. It will take 300 years to build a new tradition. The evacuation will continue." Thanks to his determination, thousands of men escaped. Cunningham didn't stop there. He helped lead the Allied landings in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, and later played a key role in D-Day, ensuring the massive fleet for Operation Overlord successfully carried troops across the Channel. By 1943, Cunningham was promoted to First Sea Lord, the highest position in the Royal Navy. His strategic genius and fearless leadership cemented his place as one of Britain's greatest admirals of the war. Finally, there was Admiral William Bull Halsey, the most aggressive U.S. admiral of the war, a man whose fearless leadership and relentless drive helped turn the tide in the Pacific. Halsey was a fighter through and through. He believed in taking the war straight to the enemy and never backing down. He was bold, unpredictable, and always willing to take risks, a trait that made him a favorite among his men but sometimes put him at odds with more cautious strategists like Admiral Raymond Spruance. Halsey first made his mark in carrier warfare, leading American naval forces through the brutal Solomon Islands campaign in 1942 and 1943. When the Doolittle raid was launched, a daring air attack on Tokyo itself, it was Halsey who commanded the task force that delivered the bombers. Though the raid caused little physical damage, it shook Japan's confidence, proving that even the home islands were not safe from American attacks. But Halsey's most famous moment came at the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944. the largest naval battle in history and the battle that sealed Japan's fate. By this point in the war, the Japanese Navy was desperate. They devised an elaborate decoy plan using a weakened carrier force to lure Halsey's fleet away from the invasion beaches at Leyte, where American troops were landing. It worked. Halsey, always eager for a fight, took the bait and chased after the decoy force, leaving the landing forces vulnerable. It was nearly a disaster. While Halsey was hunting the decoy carriers, a powerful Japanese battleship fleet, including the monstrous Yamamoto, closed in on the unprotected American transport ships. At the last moment, a small group of escort carriers and destroyers, commanded by Admiral Clifton Sprague, fought back with incredible bravery, holding off the Japanese long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Halsey's mistake could have cost the United States dearly, but Leyte Gulf still ended in crushing American victory. The Japanese Navy was shattered, and they never again launched a major offensive. Despite the controversy, Halsey remained one of the war's most celebrated admirals, his aggressive approach helping ensure American dominance in the Pacific. And that's our list of the 5 greatest admirals of World War II. Some were strategic masterminds, others were relentless warriors, but all of them left a lasting impact on history. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our other World War II content.